Welcome to our Live from Israel Ben-Gurion Briefings webinar series. It's April 29th, 2020, noon Eastern Time in New York City. Here I am in my virtual studio, and it's 7 p.m. in Israel. Today we're celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day. We're going to celebrate it uniquely with a webinar that represents a real change of pace about Jewish humor. What's so funny? The subject of Jewish humor as self-expression. And we are also, for the first time in our webinar series, streaming on Facebook Live. So thank you all for joining us. We have one of our record attendances, over 327 people and growing pre-registered, and we have a terrific guest. Let me remind everybody how the webinar series works. After our featured speaker, who today is Dr. Eli Papo, gives his talk, you can ask questions by clicking on the Q&A button, and I'll be able to read those questions and then give them to Eli. I also want to thank everybody who, when they pre-registered, asked questions, and we have a list of some really compelling questions. So I'm going to introduce Eli. He's going to give a talk for 15 or 20 minutes. We'll use the last 10 minutes of this 30-minute webinar to bring questions from the audience. And the goal of all of this is that if you give us 30 minutes, we're going to give you a glimpse into the remarkable work at BGU. So today, on Israel's 72nd birthday, we have Dr. Eli Papo, who teaches oral Jewish literature, Jewish folklore, as well as Sephardic culture and literature at BGU's Department of Hebrew Literature, a department we're very proud of. His book, And Thou Shalt Jest with Your Son, Judea's Spanish Parodies on the Passover Haggadah, received the prestigious Ben-Zvi Award. Born and raised in Sarajevo, Eli holds a BA in law from the University of Sarajevo. He also has a degree in rabbinics from the Midrash Sephardi in Jerusalem, an MA in Jewish language and literature from the Hebrew University, and received his PhD in Hebrew literature from Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Since 1997, Dr. Papo has also served as the non-residential rabbi for the Sephardic Jewish communities of Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Sarajevo. Welcome, Eli. Thank you so much for joining us at AABGU Live from Israel Ben-Gurion Briefings. Take it away.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach, or Hag Sameach. And we live in impossible times. That's why I agreed to impossible mission to summarize research on Jewish humor in 15 or 20 minutes. However, though, just like all the things, Jewish humor is also first attested in written form in the Hebrew Bible. But I want us to think for a moment about this very revolutionary idea of the Hebrew Bible, that God is a writer. Now, it doesn't matter whether you believe or you don't, but he's presented as a writer of that book. Not only that, but he's also kind of a Hitchcock type of author, because he's also the character in his book. The same way Hitchcock appears in his movies, God himself, who wrote the book, at least the first part of it, the Torah, appears also as a character in the book. So I would like to share with you some of the biblical verses which make me ask the question whether God has sense for humor as an author and also as a character. So we can see here from the book of Genesis, God is speaking to Abraham, and he says, "And God said unto Abraham, and for Sarai, thy wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her, and moreover, I'll give thee a son of her. Yeah, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be of her." Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed. and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? Now in Hebrew it says Vaitzchak. Vaitzchak
So
Abraham.
Ellie, I think you're using your presentation. Make sure that you
Yes.
click on the share screen feature.
Oh, I forgot to do that. Let's do
No
that
problem.
now. Okay. Yes. So here we can see it. Yes. Okay. Now in Hebrew, this is Vaitzchak Abraham. And of course, Abraham is doing this in his own heart, but that's not what he's telling God. However, though, the sentence that he does say to God somehow betrays that he doesn't believe in the divine promise. And he says, oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. And God said, nay, but Sarah, thy wife, shall bear thee a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. Now, we are so used to this name, Isaac and Yitzchak, that we usually don't bear in our mind that piece of information that this also means, and he shall laugh, or he laughed, because Abraham laughed. So basically here we have a beautiful example of divine sense of humor, because in the middle of establishment of a covenant, you also have some kind of divine irony, because the child that is the barrier of this covenant is called, and he laughed, because Abraham laughed. But the best example, to my understanding, is to be found in the Book of Numbers, which we call in Hebrew Bamidbar. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting. And the children of Israel also wept on their part and said, would that we were given flesh to eat. We remember the fish which we were wont to eat in Egypt for now, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all. We have not saved this manna to look to. Now the manna is falling to them from the heaven. And I've always believed that this is a literary exaggeration until the civil war in Yugoslavia started. And I met a mother of a friend of mine. I met her in Mahane Yehuda in Jerusalem. And I didn't even know that she made it to Israel. So I was like, how are you doing? When did you come? And she said, well, after the war started, we came, and whatever, we settled, we had some problems, but it's good now. So I say, well, all in all, how do you summarize it? And she's like, well, everything is all right. It's just that they don't have plums for a knedelach. In Yugoslavia, we make special kind of knedelachs which have plums. And then I recognized that this is also the way the people deal with historic events which are overwhelming. So they concentrate on something small. And this is exactly how the generation for which, the sea split and they go through the sea and the food is coming of the heaven. And then everything they can say is the garlic and the cucumbers that they remember from Egypt. But here then, if this is not humoristic, then God doesn't have sense for humor as an author and also as a character. So I named this passage from the same book of Torah, God the Father and Moses the Yiddish Mame. And it says like following. And Moses heard the people weeping, family by family, every man at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly, and Moses was displeased. And Moses said unto the Lord, wherefore has you dealt ill with thy servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that you lies the burden of all of these people upon me? So God is disappointed with the child. Father is disappointed with the child. Mother feels it's her responsibility. So she says, well, what do you want from me? I'm raising this child on my own. Have I conceived all these people? Have I brought them forth? That you should say unto me, carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father carrieth the sucking child unto the land which you did swear unto their fathers. So basically Moses says, I don't have anything to do with this. Deal with them. It's your son. It's your child. It's your people. You promised the promise to their fathers. You should deliver. When should I have flesh to give unto all these people? For they troubled me with their weeping, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. I'm not able to bear all these people myself alone, because it's too heavy for me. And if you deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not look upon my wretchedness. And then here is divine answer. I got a darling, we are hiring a babysitter. And the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men of elders of Israel, whom you knows to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them unto the tent of meeting, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and speak with thee there, and I will take of spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that you bear it not thyself alone. And then God's answer to the people is also humoristic, because it's full of sarcasm. And say do unto the people, sanctify yourself against tomorrow, and ye shall eat flesh. For ye have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, would that we were given flesh to eat, for it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you flesh, and ye shall eat. Ye shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but the whole month, until it come out at your nostrils, and it be loathsome unto you, because that ye have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have troubled him with weeping, saying, why now came we forth out of Egypt? Now, I also want
Eli,
to...
does this mean that the original comedic duet wasn't Laurel and Hardy, it was actually God and Moses?
Well, yeah, to a certain extent. But I also want to point that there are also very specific genres of humor used all over the Bible. For example, the pun of names. So Beelzebul, right? His name in Canaanite, in Ugaritic, is actually Baal Zevul, where Baal means the master and Zevul means the universe. So Baal Zevul is basically the master of the universe. Now, it would be totally unfitting for the monotheistic Semitic authors of the Bible to use such a name for a false deity. So they call him in English Beelzebub, which in Hebrew is Baal Zevuv. So are basically changing only the L for V, and instead of the master of universe, you get the master of flies. And everybody knows what's that attracts flies. But they also know that you can never, I mean, the authors of the Bible also knew that you can never make the same joke twice. So Isabel, the Jezebel in English, it's the same root. Baal Zevul is in the root of her name also. But here they are not playing on Zevul, universe, Zevuv, fly, but they convert Zevul, universe, into Zevel, which means trash. So basically, whoever is not reading Bible in Hebrew is missing an entire humoristic genre of pun of names, because her name basically means not even a trash. And what I would like to argue in this introductory part is that there is an entire biblical book which is written in a humorous manner. And that would be the Book of Jonah. So I'm actually arguing that it's oldest known Jewish parody. Now, I will not dwell, because we don't have enough time, on the fact that the name of the prophet is Jonah, and the Jonah in Hebrew means pigeon, and pigeon is actually the bird which was sent to bring back the information, the flood has stopped, the divine wrath has ended, and so on. But let's concentrate on this guy who rejects, and then he is swallowed by a fish. And just like anybody else, I mean, what do you do when a fish swallows you? You are angry at God for 3 days. And only after 3 days, you actually accept the mission. So once he accepted the mission, God resends him or sends him again to Nineveh. And Nineveh is like New York of old. And here we have this young Israeli on the corner of the 53rd Street and the 5th Avenue in the middle of New York. And this is a parody because the prophets came to Israel and they were talking for years and nobody listened to them. And they came to their own people, they spoke in their own language, and this was for years. And then all of a sudden we have this Israeli coming to New York and he's saying a single sentence on a single spot. And it says like this, and the word of the Lord came unto Jonah the second time, saying, arise, go unto Nineveh, that great city, and make unto it the proclamation that I bid thee. So Jonah arose and went unto Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceeding great city of 3 days journey. It takes 3 days to get from one side of the city to another. And Jonah began to enter into the city a day's journey. So he's making 1 day journey without saying anything. And he proclaimed and said on the corner of 53rd and the 5th Avenue, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Now we know when the prophets come to the people of Israel and they say things, people don't listen and they repeat them and people don't listen. And even when they go to the kings, you know, like the king of Egypt, the Paro, and then he says, who is God that I should listen to him, and so on. But here we have a totally different effect. This is the picture and these are the words. And the people of Nineveh believed God. And they proclaimed a fast and put on a sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. And the tidings reached the king of Nineveh. Now we expect the king to say, at least the king should act normally or according to the script. And the king should say, who is God? Who is this Jonah? Which end of the world? Which divine wrath or divine punishment? However, though, and he arose from his throne and let his robe from him, and covered him with sackcloth and sat in ashes, and he caused it to be proclaimed and published through Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, saying, let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock, taste anything. Let them not feed nor drink water, but let them be covered with sackcloth, both man and beast, and let them cry mightily unto God. Yea, let them turn everyone from his evil way and from the violence that's in their hands, who note whether God will not turn and repent and turn away from his fierce anger, that we perish not. Now, we never heard before of animals fasting, of animals not drinking water, animals not eating, but let alone that, but animals wearing something like this, that would be kind of too much, because it makes perfect sense for a man to atone for his sins by wearing something like this. But animals on top of everything, on top of their natural fur, so it's obviously an exaggeration. So I'm leaving you with all these ideas of Jonah as a pigeon, and this was actually his primary mission, but he rather was the prophet of the divine wrath. I'm also not dwelling too much upon the fact that Nineveh in Hebrew means the oasis of the fish, and that Jonah was swallowed by the fish. So if you are not a light to the nations, you are swallowed by them, and so on. I'm leaving you with all these because I switch now to the later post-biblical Jewish humor. So it's interesting that we don't know. We don't have YouTube from 6th or 7th century. So we don't know what was the popular humor and what were the popular jokes and what the people were laughing about. What we do know is when we start having secular literature in Spain, for example, there is plenty of parodies in Hebrew and of humoristic passages in all those. And when we speak of the golden age of Hebrew poetry in Spain, some people think it's always Muslim Spain. Other people think it's always Christian Spain. But it's very important to underline that they actually, the borders keeps moving, and the golden age is on both sides of the border, because exactly the place where three cultures meet, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, that's the place which enriches them all, and the Jews. So right now, very briefly, there are two heroes of recent Jewish culture, like Herschele of Ostropol in the Ashkenazi culture, and Joha in Sephardi culture. And both of these examples are very telling as far as Jewish experience in diaspora is concerned. So I'll concentrate for a moment on Joha. Being the fact that Sephardic Jews lived in an empire which was multinational and multi-ethnic and multi-religious, they were not embodiment of otherness, so they were just another ethnic group, one of many. So they choose to adopt a hero of a general Arab culture, which was called Joha, and they tell their jokes via Joha. Sometimes Joha is Jewish, sometimes Joha is Muslim, sometimes Joha is Christian, when the context demands for that. But most of the time, Joha is nothing, just like Superman. No, but you know, when you say Superman, nobody thinks whether he's Seventh-day Adventist or Quack or whatever, or Amish or Baptist. So this was one type of culture. And then in Ashkenazi culture, we have Herschele, and from the very name, you can see that the guy is Jewish. Hirsch means actually a dyer or tzvi in Yiddish. Herschele is the diminutive form, and he's basically a historical figure. And even there, we can say that there is much of class humor, because in the Ashkenazi humor, there is also the poor against the rich and the rich against the poor and so on. And the Herschele is kind of not only Jewish hero versus the Gentiles, but also the hero of the poor Jews versus the learned Jews and versus the rich Jews. So to give you one example, how the Sephardic Jews are using this Joha. Many a time, he is just a simpleton. He's just an idiot. So he, for example, he is washing his cat. A neighbor comes to him and tells him, you don't wash a cat, it will die. And he says, why should it die? I'm washing it because it's dirty. So later, the same neighbor finds Joha giving a burial to his cat. So he said, you see, it died. And he said, oh no, it never died because I washed it. It died when I started, what's the English word? When I started to wring it out. Yeah, that would be the English word. When I started to bring it out. However, though, in those cases where Joha is Jewish, then all of a sudden his nature changes. So there's a beautiful story. The Sultan of Turkey decided that he doesn't want two types of non-Muslims in his country. One type of non-Muslims is enough. So he invited the chief rabbi and the patriarch of the Christians, and he told them, listen, you guys have 3 days now to prepare, and then you will have a competition, and whoever wins, the other guy and his entire community will have to convert either to that religion or to my religion. So the rabbi comes home, and his wife says, oh, you know, the Christians, they have so much money, they probably bribed the Sultan, this is all sold out. And the rabbi flees away. And the Jews, yeah.
The questions are starting to build, and we're beginning to run out of time. So I want to try to transition to some of the questions from the audience.
Okay, so let me finish the story. It's just 1 minute, even less, and then we can switch to questions. So basically, the Jews open the, Echal, and they take out the Sifrei Torah, and Joha comes up and he says, would you like me to go? And they say, you are an idiot. And he says, oh, don't worry, I'll just go. He goes there and they ask each other the questions. And finally, the patriarch tells him, the Joha tells the patriarch, what does that mean? Eneni yodea, which in Hebrew means I don't know. So the patriarch says, I don't know. And the Sultan says, oh, you don't know. So now you have to convert either to Judaism or to Islam. So Joha comes out and everybody asks him, how was it? And he tells them the story, and they say, wow, that's genius. And he says, why? I was reading Mishnah, I came up in the sentence, and then you're there. I went to the rabbi, asked him, what does it mean? The rabbi said, I don't know. So I thought, if the rabbi didn't know, then the patriarch will certainly not know either. So basically, you see how he is, how he's playing on the both sides. Yeah, that's one illustration. There are many more, but that's one.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Eli. First, just a quick note of appreciation to Rav Eleazar from your good friend Ernie Simon.
Oh,
Susan Winarski asks, how does Old Testament humor express itself in modern American Jewish humor or modern Sephardic Jewish humor?
That's, well, we are not a monolithic people, so it's all down to the group to which you belong. In yeshiva environment, you would have a lot of humor which is based on intentions, misreading of biblical words. Like, for example, gamal, ligmol in Hebrew means to bestow. So there is, when the people of Israel are leaving Egypt, they sing Ashir al Adonai ki gamal alai. I'm singing to God because he bestowed upon me his mercy. But gamal in Hebrew also means a camel. So in yeshiva today in America, they would ask you a question, which blessing do you say when the camel sits upon you? And then you are supposed to give the verse as ki gamal alai, right? So today we have a lot of intellectual humor where we are misreading on purpose the biblical verses, and that's typical for yeshiva culture. But I'm not aware of any real influences of biblical humor on secular Jewish culture in America. In Israel, of course, there is. There is an entire, you can see it on YouTube, and it's even translated to English. There is Yehudim Baim, the Jews are coming, humoristic series, and it's modern Hebrew humoristic interpretation of the Bible.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a great question related to that from one of the participants who asked when they registered. So one clearly needs a sense of humor to live in Israel. Are there unique characteristics to Israeli humor?
Well, Israeli humor is immediate humor. What does that mean? It's, first of all, nobody in Israel has nerves, or atzabim, we say, nerves, to listen to, 2 minutes or 5 minutes long joke. The two aspects of Israeli society, they both reflect the same culture. So some people say shalom achshav, because peace next Monday is not good enough. We want peace now. And the other people say Mashiach achshav, because Mashiach next Sunday is too late. Next Sunday I have other plans already. So we want Mashiach achshav. So whatever we want it now. Consequently, Israeli humor is short and straight to the point.
Very good. Thank you very much. I want to remind the audience to ask a question. You click on the Q&A function. A few of you have been raising your hands, but the way we work with these webinars is to ask the questions via Q&A. So if you have a question, just click on Q&A, write the question. I'll do my best to get it to Eli. So let's talk a little bit about Sephardim. So in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. There was also the Spanish Edict of Expulsion, and Jews were given a choice to convert, to leave, or to die. I take it your family somehow made its way to the Balkans. Can you talk a little bit about just yourself and growing up as a Sephardic Jew? And is there unique, who's funnier, the Sephardim or the Ashkenazi?
Well, first of all, it's complicated to speak of, who is funnier or to compare Jewish humor, because when you have so dispersed ethno-confessional group as Jews, living across cultures, across continents, and across centuries, you cannot have a monolithic thing. But what I can see is that Sephardic humor is different in terms of, first of all the Jews, wherever they were a minority. Consequently, as typical for a minority group, they've used humor as strategy to deal with reality. However, though, with Sephardim, being the fact that they were not embodiment of otherness, they were just like one of many minoritarian groups, the pun of their humor is somehow extrovert, is actually against other groups. Now, the Ashkenazi humor has this aspect also, but it also has a huge introvert aspect, where actually via humor, you are dealing with the prejudices of the society for which you are the embodiment of otherness. And via humor, you are internalizing and then throwing out all these stereotypes, negative stereotypes, and so on. That's one thing. Second thing is what you asked about.
I asked you a little bit about what makes who's funnier, but also what it was like growing up. But we're running out of time, and I want to switch to one more question, and then we'll wrap up. So we're living in a lockdown, a global pandemic of the coronavirus. You know, how important is humor during times like this, and in particular, Jewish humor?
Extremely important, because you know, if you could actually call your Jewish ancestors from like 18th century, 17th century, 16th century, and tell them that your world is coming apart, they would say, "Oh, this is your first time," right? So throughout the Jewish history, Jews were kind of very ready, or not ready. They lived in extreme situations, and humor was a way to cope with them. One of the main I shouldn't say targets. One of the main things that we achieve via humor is to convert the facts into effects. We convert the facts into effects. And besides that, when you don't know what's going on, and when you are, I'll tell you a short story, and then maybe we will end with it. But there was this major folklorist who was trying to convince his young and totally modern secretary that it's important to tell to children old fairy tales. And she was like, "Why should I teach him that they are vampires and that they are," and then he will come to me, running to me. And he says, "Listen, the children have fears anyways. When you tell them stories, then these stories help them embody those fears and deal with them, anthropomorphizing them." So that's what actually humor does for us. It gives anthropomorphical and consequently dealable, if there is such a word in English, but dealable shape to our problems.
Thank you very much, Eli. Okay, so I want to just close this webinar by thanking the staff that works so hard to put on these webinars. I want, in particular, Melody Mokhtarian, Ronnie Strongen, and Dana Ben-Benyamin, who works with us in Israel. Thank you for all your hard work. I'm going to share some of our events that are coming up on the screen. Hopefully you can see this now. This is the aabgu.org website. It's chock full of great information about everything happening at BGU. And if you click on the events section, you can see the different events and things happening. Here's our webinar today. And on May the 5th, we're doing one on predictable income in difficult times, featuring an expert, Neil Meyerberg. We'll have another webinar on BGU's task force and interdisciplinary response and research projects to COVID-19. It's our third webinar on that subject. And on May the 17th, there's going to be a BGU open house and virtual mini Board of Governors meeting that you're all attended to. So once again, happy birthday, Israel. You're looking great at 72, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great day. Thanks, Ellie.
More than welcome. Hag Sameach.